right. Why pink? Is it because I'm a woman that I'm wearing pink? Do all women like pink? Do developers look like this? Or do they look like this? Does my appearance change my skills? Does my appearance change your perception of me? These are some interesting questions that I've been thinking about lately. And when you think about it, today the population in the world is 52% women. But currently, most technology is designed by men. Because as you can see from looking around in the Java community, it's about representative. About 20% of all technology jobs are held by women. So it's proven by numerous studies, however, that teams which include both men and women are smarter, more innovative, more creative. Their collective IQ actually rises regardless of the individual IQs of the people in the team. So clearly, there's a reason that we should be all concerned and have a responsibility to ensure that we have more diversity in technology. So I have this quote here, "She who is brave is free." And I share this with you because there are also studies that show that women and minorities who talk about diversity are actually penalized in terms of peer perceptions of their performance. However, men, particularly white men, are not. So we have a big opportunity here. It does cost me to talk about this subject, but I feel as our society becomes more digital and technology is touching everything in our life, that it is imperative that we together as a community talk about some of the things that we can do to make a difference and to change this dynamic. So when I first started working in technology, I've been working with the Java community now for 16 years. I truly believe that tech was a meritocracy and that working hard was all it took. However, I found that doing your job in tech as a woman will get you absolutely nowhere. If you want to survive, you must be exceptional at your job. But if you want to thrive in technology, you need to be managing the perception of yourself. You need to be increasing your visibility. You need to be expanding your influence. And in order to do that, you need to have sponsors, mentors, and allies. And I have been very fortunate that I have had that in my career, and I am currently a director working with the Java community. I'm an international speaker. I represent the Java community process, so I have a little bit of a privileged position, you could say, in the community with a built-in respect. And one of the most common questions I started to get after I actually realized I was one of the only women working in the Java community, because it actually took me a few years before I realized this. I was a little bit oblivious, you could say. So it wasn't something that bothered me. I love working with the Java community. I love my job. I love all of the people that I work with. But I started to wonder what was the problem. I started to focus on the pipeline, so getting more girls into technology, doing DevOps for Kids workshops, and really focusing on getting that interest in girls. But then more and more often, people in the Java community, as the men start to have children, started to ask me, why weren't there any more women that they could be working with, and what could they do? So that was my motivation for putting together this talk, which is going to be the top 10 ways for people to ally for women in tech. And the very first thing when I start to think about this is a little bit of a mind shift. So think of ally as a verb. So it's a thing that you do sometimes, not all of the time, not a thing that you are or that you call yourself. So think of it as an action: to join, to unite, to support. Tip number 1. And I like to talk about one of my first conference experiences was actually FOSDEM, which is the world's largest free and open source conference. And being that I work with the Java community, I spent two days in the Java dev room, which, has anyone ever been to FOSDEM Java dev room? It's a room for about 25 people, but they put about 60 to 75 people in there, and I happen to be the only woman. And there's actually beer flowing the whole conference, and there's really not any air conditioning, so it can be, a little bit of a unique experience. Not for everyone, but I can say that the men who were there were very welcoming to me, and they took actions to make me feel welcome and to be part of the group. So those kind of actions really make a difference. It's the acting and not necessarily the calling of I'm an ally. Tip number 2. Be open. So first of all, I think you have to recognize that talking about these subjects, sexism, discrimination, stereotypes, race, diversity, it can be a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. And actually, it's uncomfortable for me too. So just to recognize that you will continue to make mistakes, but that's okay. But if you can be simple when you take some of these actions, be straightforward, direct, and kind, you can really make a difference in the lives of women who want to be part of the tech world. So one of the things that I've also found in kind of studying the community and the tech space is assignment distribution. If you can be aware of the assignment distribution of tasks on your team and actually take acts to redistribute these things, I think it makes a positive impact and actually a huge difference. So when you think about assignment distribution, think about the aspect of housework versus real work. So this goes across industries, some of the types of housework that I could be talking about. Scheduling meetings, or cleaning up the conference room after a meeting, scheduling parties after work. These can be seen as housework, but in tech in particular, it's a pretty clear divide. The housework is managing the projects, and the real work is owning and writing the code. So if you can find ways to make sure that there's a balance when you do have women on your team between the women and men in the housework versus real work, that's going to make a significant difference. A friendly environment. So we all know and go to conferences where we have birds of a feather sessions, which is birds of a feather flock together. So if you can create a friendly environment for you and others around you, it's going to help dissuade that myth and the cultural perpetuity of this bro-grammar culture, because it is something that exists. And looking for a way to actually connect with the people on your team, whether they're men or women, and looking for things that you have in common, and actually asking questions about their work and listening more than you're talking, you'll be able to create that friendly environment where everyone on your team feels welcome. Okay. Number 5, halfway through the 10 tips. So speak up. And you can do this when you're at meetings in your job. You can do this when you're participating in online forums. And you can do this when you're attending conferences like this one. So I have about 3 examples I'd like to share where are times when you can speak up. For example, a woman might make a suggestion and the rest of the group wouldn't give you any response. But then you'll have a man make the suggestion a few moments later and claim credit for that idea. And there are many reasons for this happening. There's things about the tone of voice that some people just don't hear. But if you happen to witness this happening, this is an opportunity for you to act as an ally and speak up and mention that we heard this idea previously and speak up in that instance. Another time when this happens is in interrupting. So oftentimes you'll have someone speaking and being interrupted. So if you can speak up in those cases to allow the person to finish talking, that can make a huge difference. And the third item is actually speaking up when you find people who are reluctant to speak and contribute. So if you have a woman on the team and she doesn't seem to feel comfortable contributing or isn't saying anything, speak up and ask her opinion or ask what she thinks. Intervene. So I've been fortunate in my career that I haven't run into many of these difficult situations, but I have heard of many difficult situations that women run to in conferences, in particular when alcohol is involved. So this is another opportunity for you to act, to intervene when inappropriate things are going on. Particularly consider for a woman, there's really no appropriate amount of sex for a woman to have, because if she's having any sex at all, she's probably perceived as a slut, and if she's having no sex, she's perceived as frigid. So in general, just those types of conversations are things that you probably want to avoid. Okay, that was my one attempt at humor. All right, character traits. Be aware of character traits. Now, this is something, too, that I think a lot of discussion has gone on around. Public criticism of women at forums and conferences and in meetings. So, criticizing a woman for cursing or being too aggressive or too loud, being out of line, being too bossy. So, be aware of the fact that you probably haven't heard those words described to describe men's behavior. So be aware of that if you find yourself using these types of words in your head or they're being verbalized, and take action and speak up in those instances. And I'd like to share a little bit from my perspective here. As I said, I've been working in tech world now for over 16 years. It's a little bit like a tightrope for a woman, because I've definitely had to manage perceptions of my own behavior, and that you don't want to be too feminine, because then you can't be effective. But at the same time, you don't want to be too masculine, because then you're not likable. So it's a little bit like a tightrope. And, for me, the particular instance for me is that I've been described in the past as being abrasive. And there's actually been quite a bit of research on this in performance reviews in particular, where we find often women are described as abrasive, but we don't see that coming up for men in their performance reviews. So take that into consideration when there are words that come up, because as I said, I perceive myself as a warm connector, a brave leader, but at the same time, I have had the feedback, especially in the beginning of my career, that I was being a little bossy or a little bit cold. So just keep that in mind and speak up if you hear these discussions happening in your workplace or in the community. Be aware of these perceptions that people have and the impact that you can make if you're willing to step up and be aware of this. Number 8 out of 10, level the playing field. So this is especially important, I think, in hiring and in promotions for technical jobs. How can you level the playing field? And one of the most important things you can do is look for ways that you can encourage norms in your environment that maybe some women find uncomfortable. So research has shown that some women find self-promotion and salary negotiation uncomfortable. And it just so happens that in the tech world, you need to have these skills in order to move up in the ranks. You have to be willing to self-promote. You have to be willing to negotiate your salary. And that's part of the reason why women are paid 72% less for the technology jobs that they do have, is because they're just not comfortable with salary negotiation. And there are exceptions, of course. I'm not one of these people. I know many women who aren't, but the research shows that there are a majority of women who find these types of behaviors uncomfortable. So look for ways that you can encourage this in your work environment, that it's the norm that you would apply for a job, maybe that you don't think you're ready for. Women oftentimes will wait until they have all of the skills for a job before they apply, where men would apply and learn on the job. So if you can encourage women to apply, encourage them to promote themselves, that it's expected of them, not that it's just something you can do, but that it's an expectation. And the same thing with salary negotiation. Number 9, and this is really an important one that I've recently started to take a little bit more look into, which is unconscious bias. So the thing is that we all have bias. I have bias, you have bias, and we don't even necessarily know about it. It's unconscious. But it's just part of being human, that we pattern match and we try to fit information that comes into our brain into certain categories. So what I've found lately are 2 tips for this, as ways I'm trying to combat this in my own mind, as I'm now a hiring manager and looking for ways to eliminate my unconscious bias. And one of those is that I actually stop when I'm feeling uncomfortable with a situation or upset with a situation. I stop and actually share with someone else the experience of what actually happened, the skills of that person and the behavior that they actually exhibited, not my opinion about it, but what actually happened. And then the second thing is mentoring someone who's different from you. So I've been mentoring people who are different from me. You can learn a tremendous amount by mentoring someone different from you. And number 10, and I think the most important, is suggest women speakers. So support and encourage women speakers. When you're invited to be on a panel or speak at a conference, consider if there's a woman that you could suggest to speak with you as well. Look for ways that you can bring them into the conversation and encourage them. Here's just an example. This is an almost male panel. This is my daily life. Basically, it's me and 30 men. So almost male panel. So. And I definitely have had men throughout my career do this for me, so it definitely has made a difference for me. So I encourage you all to do that. It's something that you can definitely have an impact on the women's lives around you. So I believe we can do this, and I believe that you're here, and that makes you awesome. So thanks for sacrificing part of your lunch to be here and hear my 10 tips. But I also just want to remind you from the beginning, you will make mistakes. We will all continue to make mistakes, but it's important that we continue trying and we don't give up. And even if you don't get the praise and credit that you think you should get when you're doing your ally work, please keep it up because it's important and it makes a difference. I believe that as a community, the power of community, being that I have worked with the Java community for many years, can create the change and be the change that we wish to see in creating gender parity in tech. And I would love to hear your feedback. I'll be upstairs in the Hacker Garden the rest of today. I actually will not be here tomorrow, but you can find me on Twitter if you want to tweet any questions or comments to me. And I appreciate, again, your time, so thank you for that.